Fantastic Four fails to save the day as expected. As a matter of fact, it colossally failed. A huge, over 60% drop off weekend to weekend. Its second weekend embarrassingly short of Superman, and it really starts to prove the fact that Disney, Marvel has lost its way in one of the most embarrassing fashions ever. Not quite sure what I'm talking about? Well, let's jump into the shortcomings that is Fantastic Four, Marvel's Last Steps. Here we go. Believe it or not, it looks like the trades have actually returned to reality. And so have, well, most of the critics out there who are starting to realize that selling out their reputation on things that are guaranteed to fall short because they lean deeply into the gynocentric type of filmmaking or the political type of filmmaking or even the identity politics sort of filmmaking will absolutely destroy anything that they go pump up or shield. The rest of the audience isn't fooled anymore, and it's starting to highlight every single one of the trade articles this weekend. Doesn't matter who it came from, the catastrophic loss from weekend to weekend is the story of the day. Let's take a look at Hollywood Reporter for a little reinforcement. You see the box office Fantastic Four lorded over basically every other movie, but that's because they were smaller films. Bad Guys 2, Naked Gun, which didn't exactly do the numbers I was hoping for, but still on the right side of comedy, which we need far more of, and much less of Pedro. Pascal, which I think even Hollywood has figured out the audience is not only tired of, they are nuisance by him. But the Marvel superhero pick tumbled 66%. That's right, a flop from weekend to weekend with not a whole lot of repeat business, I would imagine. The sophomore outing domestically compared to a 53% DC drop for Superman, which seems about right for tentpoles that are of the superhero genre. And it's maybe not the entire genre, just the terribly corrupted portions of the genre that are going to have problems in the future. What's more, the first three paragraphs of this Hollywood Reporter story are classic. Talk about a two-edged sword. Marvel's The Fantastic Four First Step stayed atop the domestic box office chart in its second weekend with $40 million, which tumbled a worrisome 66%. That's more than anyone could have predicted after the event pick opening to $117.6 million last weekend. That's not true. I predicted this. Amid a stellar audience and critical reaction. At the same time, it wasn't entirely outside the range of normal for the superhero genre, and there's still a clear runway ahead before summer ends. There's just going to be less kids in the theaters since they're basically all going back to school either the beginning or end of this coming week. And it even fell short of the internal goal of crossing $200 million domestically through, obviously, Sunday night. But instead, it's projecting a 10-day domestic tally of 198.4, which it could still fall short of, not going to compare much against Superman. And it doesn't get better. When you take a look at the Fantastic Four sinking 66% from box office opening weekend, that was the lead article for The Wrap, you see a straight admission that Marvel's latest film isn't holding as well as Superman. Again, something not only did I predict, but basically everybody else in the genre. There is no room for corrupted movies anymore. The fans are weary of them, and it's starting to look like the tabloid trades are starting to weary of them as well, as that seems to be one of the key items that's probably destroying any kind of legitimate criticism from any of these outlets. Not only that, but their reputation as well. What's more is these numbers, believe it or not, may not be even as low as it could go this weekend, because there are other outlets, and we'll get to those in a moment, that are predicting a lower number than is even represented here. Of course, I always turn to a regular reporter of quality news in Cosmic Book News. Fantastic Four bombing box office facing massive 66% decline decline, that is. And you know what? It's as sad as the look Pedro Pascal's face right there. And as Cosmic Book News reports, it's becoming quite clear that DCU's Superman is outpacing Marvel's Fantastic Four this summer. Another fact that I told you about last week. Worse yet, it's on par or pace, depending upon what word you would like to use, to be compared directly to Captain Anti-America Brave New Toilet Wand, which dropped 68% as a confirmed bomb. Well, yeah, pretty much anything post-January has turned out to be an utter disaster, a disgrace, a failure. There's only been one movie so far this year that Disney can hang its hat on, and none of them are in a genre that they would normally dominate, whether it be Star Wars or perhaps even classic live-action remakes such as Snow White or anything Marvel. Even Thunderbolts had a better waste-away rate than the current film. It was also a lot less in initial earnings than Captain Anti-America or anything near this fantastic bore, which I assure you was very boring. Regardless, at this stage, all three of these Marvel offerings and the very first one of the cinematic side of Phase 6 is a catastrophic bomb with probably very little opportunity at redemption, not even on streaming, since they sell it to themselves and not to an actual outlet, which would maybe add to their actual earnings and not try to artificially hold up a subscriber base that seems to be, if not stagnant, kind of drifting away at Disney Plus. Of course, when you take a look at what Jordan has to say over at World of Real, shock. Fantastic Four falls apart in weekend 2 with 70% drop down to 39 million targeted number. That was updated. This came out on August 2nd. That would be Saturday, taking into account the actual live earnings that were going on at the time. Whether it ends up being this steep at 70%, well, the brass tacks of it on Monday, I'm not certain that this will be the actual number. What I am certain of is this would be a more catastrophic and even worse fate for anything coming out of a Marvel property right now. Looking at a 70% drop for F4 after a decent Saturday, it's projected for 39 million. Earlier, the numbers are even worse than I had previously reported. The positive reviews aren't helping, and this film is the definition of having been front-loaded. In fact, it's something I've been calling out for a long period of time. If you've paid any attention here, all of these films are designed to extract the most amount of money they can at one time. The first opportunity, people have to see it in the first weekend. After that, you don't have any more leverage of FOMO, and you may not have an audience that is going to rely on every single release any longer. In fact, that's exactly what it looks like. Worse yet, from the article, Marvel's Fantastic Four First Steps is crashing hard in its second weekend. The film grossed just 11 million on Friday. Wow, that's low. Pointing to a steep 80% drop from its opening weekend, an alarmingly sharp fall, even by recent Marvel standards. And thank goodness it didn't slide quite that far, or I would have to say that this movie is worse than Captain Anti-America and Thunderbolts, which I think tied for worst movie of the year. And finally, I just want to take a quick look at the balance of Penske Media over at Variety, which says Fantastic Four craters to 66% in second weekend. Naked Gun debuts to 17 million. I had hoped for more, but at least that's getting comedies back into the box office, and a lot of people are really enjoying that film for being funny. And with lowered expectations, it may have a decent amount of legs. Hard to say since there's not a lot of competition entering the marketplace anytime soon. But as with almost everything these days in the entertainment field, you gotta go over to that Park Place to get the real news. You see, Marvel's Fantastic Four First Steps plummets 66% in second weekend. This is raising alarm for the MCU's future. And really, this is the kind of information you need. This is scaring Disney in a way I don't think they have been in a long time. I think they've been building dread, of course, based on the performance of a lot of their films, even the opening performance of Fantastic Four. But I think that this is letting them know that spending up to $2 to $3 billion in total over the next 2 or 3 films in the Doom saga may be a fool's errand, because they won't ever recover it. And I don't think that's a stretch for anybody to make a guess at this point in time. The film absolutely cratered in week 2 by 66% to earn just $40 million domestically, and I can't say that enough times how sad that number is, especially in comparison to James Gunn's Superman. But this film is directed by Matt Shakman. It stars Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Joseph Quinn, and Eben Moss-Bachrach as the iconic superhero team that unfortunately don't look enough alike. The film debuted to a solid, but still less than Superman, $117.6 million over the first weekend, but failed to maintain that momentum, or actually any at all, signaling potential audience fatigue or dissatisfaction amid a crowded superhero landscape. And it's not necessarily super crowded at the moment, but I think the stark differences between the exceptional films and the mediocre films are easy to spot, even in the trailers. And I think that outside of opening weekends, you're not going to have a lot of customer retention. They won't be coming back for more. Worse yet, the expected decline in the second weekend fell well short of industry projections, which were a little more modest at 55 to 60% decline. Boy, do they bet. There's also one other thing here that actually disturbs me. It's the fact that CinemaScore has no bearing on this. And that's likely because fewer people than they would have hoped saw the film to begin with, and no amount of word of mouth was going to drive people that never intended to see this film to go and see it. And that's something that Marvel used to have the power to do, but don't any longer. Maybe some of the least reliable, accurate, or well-balanced people in the field. Taking a look at this John Roca guy, says some people won't want to hear this, but it might be time to stop putting all the blame on studios or creatives for underperforming films. It might be time to start looking at the intelligence level of moviegoers. That's right. John's a big fan of attacking people. Not that it wins him, any support. If anything, it just reminds us all the dumb things he's said over time. Speaking of intelligence level, but pointing the fingers at Jurassic World, which I actually end up doing, is the simple fact that, it's not a movie for members of the Algonquin Roundtable, but it doesn't mean it's a bad movie or not enjoyable. I know a lot of people who find enjoyable opportunities right around every corner in one of these dinosaur movies. I don't blame the people for liking it. In fact, I'm glad that they did. It's nice to find something that you enjoy, because there's so little of it these days when it comes to theaters. Well, John didn't get just shushed by a lot of people on X the other day. No. He got hushed by one of the best, Gary Nerdrotic. That's right. Some shills won't want to hear this, but it might be time to stop putting all the blame on the audience for underperforming movies. It might be time to start looking at the intelligence level of the access media. And when you're going to respond with a salvo, that one's a quality salvo to return with. He's not wrong. The issue is the studios are not making high-quality films. They just aren't, and they haven't been for a while. They also don't make a lot of high-quality streaming, and if they are making good stuff, believe me, we tell you. And it all comes down, as always, to the numbers, which is making this video a little longer than normal, but for good reason. We have the numbers, and they don't look good. Staying under $200 million from the site, the numbers, you get a flat $40 million. That number will change, as will the deficit number of 66%. My guess is it might actually go down slightly, kind of like it did in the first weekend. If you remember that none of these trades actually updated any of their numbers when they reported a high, artificially high number that Disney ran with and misinformed their investors with. Worse yet, as with the second weekend of Superman, this has fallen far short of Superman in performance for the weekend. The bad guys somehow hung in there as, well, a new entry into the box office in second place, The Naked Gun in third, which I'm grateful for. And finally, Superman still hanging in there with another 13.8 million. Now, I have seen a slightly different number at an $18 million weekend. It's possible this number could be as low as 5 million with only a 44% fall off, but it could be, well, a bigger number with a lesser decline on its hold. And all of this it managed to do by losing 393 theaters over the weekend and still maintain a sizable lead with the Marvel movie that just can't seem to keep up. In fact, when you look at the direct comparison, the daily cumulative domestic office, the line here in red, that's Marvel. Not doing very well. See this number up here in blue? That's Superman. We've got 10 days in for Fantastic Four, and we've got 10 days in for Superman. This one hasn't crossed $200 million yet, and this one is sitting at, 235 or 236, kind of kicking its butt, which, again, most of us have said was going to happen. Worse yet, Superman is successful despite some things that were called out early or any of the shortcomings that were talked about after the film had premiered. Audiences kept going back to see it at a greater rate than, it seems, Marvel. And that brings us to the bigger problem. Nobody goes to re-see these Marvel films, or very few. Not a lot of people are talking about the fact that they're going to go and purchase things like Captain Anti-America or Thunderdolts. In fact, if anything, people are going to avoid purchasing those. They may not even seek out a streaming service where they could watch them. The Fantastic Four film is just another mirror image of those other two. Nobody's going back to see it, and probably no one is going to be super excited about buying it. Disney has actually chased off their most ardent fans, whether it be in theme parks or here in the movie theaters, by not offering them something compelling enough to purchase. And that extends all the way into the movie theater, but it extends well beyond. Merchandise sales are not picking up, and guests haven't identified any areas where Disney could throw some development money to at least have an entertainment tie-in within the theme parks. And while this isn't just entirely a tear-down Disney video and more about the last weekend box office, I'll say this much. Marvel will fall off such a steep cliff next weekend that it's going to fall well behind a whole lot of properties, despite the fact that there will be very little new on offer. In fact, if anything, it may hurt the exhibitors by just not drawing a crowd to the theater in the first place, because sometimes you're inspired to see a second film or follow up and see the same movie twice. And right now, there's not a lot of things like that that show up in the theaters anymore, and none of them right now have the word Marvel on them. And now we get to my final comments. We don't have another Marvel offering in theaters this year, which is both a blessing and maybe a curse. It's a blessing for the audience, not being in a position where their patience is being tried so often, but it's quite the curse for Disney with no opportunity to recover before a major gamble on Doomsday. It's also a curse for the exhibitors themselves, as I mentioned just a moment ago. They're not going to draw in that crowd, at least not with any of those films. And with fewer and fewer high-quality offerings at the movie theaters, the worst predictions could come true, and our palaces to film may go out of business, as everybody feared. I hope not. I love going to the movies. I just wish there were some to go to. Like, later in the week, I'll be dropping my thoughts on Naked Gun, and I hope you get a chance to check that out. But what about you? That's right, we are to audience participation time. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Are you looking forward to anything? Did you actually enjoy Fantastic Four? Do you think that it's probably likely to fail more spectacularly next weekend? Or do you think it'll continue to have about the same descent that it's been having all along? Is Disney just stuck in the doldrums, or is it specifically the people guiding Marvel right now? Again, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below, along with anything else you'd like to talk about around the movie genres. Until then, as always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands because it is good hygiene. And until next time, see ya! Hopefully at a good movie.